G'day there YouTube, welcome back to the channel everyone, and congratulations to all of you. You found the champ dog. So, a little bit of a different video for you today. We're just going to sit down, have a chat, just you and me. So make sure you got a mug of something delicious, and let's get to it. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, it's only fair I tell you guys, this mug actually just contains water. And that's because I'm re-recording this whole thing. I put in about an hour and a half of work only to realise that because of some hardware problems with my PC, none of the audio had been picked up. So I'm probably going to move through this a little more quickly than I'd originally intended, partly because I've just spent the last hour and a half talking. My voice is sore, I'm tired, and I need to move on to editing so that this video can actually be with you guys. So we're going to be talking about the new format on MTG Arena, Alchemy. But first, I just want to apologise for not having a video out on Friday. I had gameplay footage ready to go. I had an intro recorded. I had everything done. I just needed to put the video together. But last week was just really tough for me. Physically, I was just really tired. And so getting into the afternoons, mentally, my brain was just fried because I was just so tired. And as I said, I had everything ready. And I sat down to edit the video and put it together, and I literally just sat here at my desk for about an hour and a half, completely unable to start. All I could muster the mental energy to do was to just scroll nonsense on Reddit and YouTube. Didn't even watch or read anything interesting. I literally sat here for an hour and a half and did nothing and just had to accept that okay, I can't do this right now, and there's not going to be a video on Friday. So I am sorry. I wanted to have that done for you guys, but I just didn't have the capacity to do it on Friday. But I do have some gameplay ready to share with you guys coming up real soon, and I will be recording some new games shortly. Normally I'd do that over the weekend. I haven't this weekend. I was helping a friend. I was working at a polling place for an election that a friend of mine is running in, and then today I've just been working on this and doing some chores. But we will be back to our regular programming very shortly. So, what is Alchemy? So Wizards announced over the weekend that there's a new format coming to MTG Arena. That is Alchemy. Alchemy is, as they put it, a digital-first format. And what that means is digital only. I don't know why they didn't just say that, but there you go. It's a digital-only format. It's coming to MTG Arena. It is based on standard, so it is going to be standard adjacent. It's going to primarily have the same sets and cards that are in standard. The plan is for it to rotate as standard rotates. But because it's a digital-only format, they're able to do some things that they're not able to do in standard. And that is tweaking the power of cards and introducing some digital-only cards. So it's basically going to be standard plus or standard minus, depending on how you feel about these things. So where cards that are a little too powerful, they can just nerf them a little bit and get them more in line with what they had intended. Cards that aren't quite performing, they can boost them up a little bit. They can introduce some cards that don't exist in paper with mechanics that can't really work in paper, similar to what we saw in Jumpstart Historic Horizons. So it gives them a chance to just explore a little more, maybe show us a little bit more of standard as they intended, perhaps. But it just gives them a little bit of wiggle room to tweak things, mix some things up, and hopefully encourage a little more diversity in the meta. That's the short version. So over the weekend, I've seen a lot of takes, some hot takes, some regular takes. I've seen a few takes on this thing. Some of them are horrible, some of them are completely valid, some I agree with, some I don't. But I'm going to go through the three archetypes of take, if you will, the three main takes that I've seen, either this take or variations of this take that I think are getting it completely wrong. Then we're going to talk about some of my thoughts and feelings, the good and the bad of it. And then hopefully at the end we'll have time to actually go through some of the altered cards to give you a little taste and a little feel for what they're actually talking about with some concrete examples. So let's talk about some people's hot takes. So the three main opinions, schools of thought, whatever you want to call them, that I want to address and hopefully take some small steps towards what I would view as correcting, are the people who are absolutely sure that they know what's going on with this. The people who are convinced that this is a good thing, people who are convinced that this is a bad thing, and some people who are convinced that this doesn't matter. Now, this is broadly and generally true of any topic. Early on, before the dust has settled, before people have actually had a chance to see what's going on and actually get some concrete results or experience to base things on, people who are sure they know what's going on are usually the least productive members of the conversation. But we'll touch on it specifically here because it's a topic that we all care about. So some people think like this is unabashedly great and no one has anything to complain about. There definitely are some good things about this. There are reasons to get excited, and I hope that you do. But there are some real, immediately obvious problems, and it does create the potential for further problems down the line. So even though there are some really good things coming out of this, and I'm actually really glad personally that Wizards is taking this step, it's important to realize that people who are upset or people who are critical, even when you might not agree with the things that they're saying, and that could be because you don't agree with the point that they're making, or you think that they're overreacting, or you just don't feel the same way that they do, even if that person is being completely over the top and making criticisms that don't seem valid, those people do have valid reasons to be upset. They do have valid reasons to be concerned. And it's, I think, just always a good practice to be patient with other people and assume the best and give them the sort of grace that you often give yourself. I noticed in my previous recording of this video, just as a product of talking about something and just my personality, I get worked up and I get energetic. I was getting a bit too worked up, a little too passionate, and saying some things that were maybe a little too far. I think we all know that we do that sometimes, and I think it's important to extend that same understanding to other people. So even if you don't agree with the specific thing that a detractor from your viewpoint is saying, even if you don't agree with what someone who thinks that this is a horrible development and the sky is falling, even if you think they're being too extreme, even if you think that they're misguided, even if you think they're misinformed, if you think that they're making a point that is objectively wrong, be patient with them, be understanding, and have that little bit of humility to accept that you could be the one who's wrong. You probably seem just as unreasonable to them. And even if you think this is fantastic, there are some valid concerns coming out of this. And that works the other way around as well. The people who are convinced that this is terrible, that it's a sign that Wizards is money grabbing, it's another FU to the player base, it's nothing but a way to take more money from people, to take value, to prey on their customers and their player base, that thinks that it's just another blunder, that it's stupid, that this shouldn't have happened, that there was no need for this, that other things are more important, and this is just bad move. Anywhere on that spectrum, that viewpoint's too extreme, because there are some genuinely good things to come out of this, and there are some, honestly, there's a certain amount of inevitability to this. There's some good things for the player base, there's some good things for Wizards, and that can be good for us as well. Wizards making money is good for us as players. Let's just get that straight. If Wizards were not making money, you wouldn't be watching this video. We wouldn't be playing this game. We would only have the cards that already existed. I get frustrated with some of the more blatantly commercial decisions that are made, but ultimately I want Wizards to make money. I want Hasbro to make money so that I can keep enjoying a game that I love, and so that more people can experience a game that I love and hopefully share that joy. That's a good thing. So Wizards trying to make money can be bad, but there is something good in that as well. If you are one of the people who is more impacted by this new format, just keep in mind that other people's experiences might be different to yours, this could be fantastic for someone else. And even if it's something you think you're not interested in, it could be something you end up enjoying. We just don't know. It's too early to tell. We also don't know if the way that they've described it to us is how it's going to stay going forward. I know this is all a bit nebulous and conceptual at this point. We will get into some like hard and fast details very shortly. I just wanted to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page and understanding that people are people, particularly people on the internet. They're still people. We sometimes say things we don't mean, say things and mean them that aren't accurate and aren't indicative of the actual situation, and that if we just took a few steps back and took a few deep breaths, put it into perspective, we wouldn't be so worked up about. And then there's also people that just think this doesn't matter. And what do I mean by this? So, for example, I specifically saw someone commenting on a video that Pleasant Kenobi put out about alchemy, basically saying this doesn't matter. The people who are complaining, like, it doesn't matter. It mostly impacts historic, and it's a make-believe format, so this doesn't matter. Now, that's just another ridiculous take. It does matter. It might not matter to you. I don't play historic, so some of the more negative aspects of this new format don't impact me personally, but that doesn't mean it doesn't matter. Other people do play historic. They might play exclusively historic, and it matters to them, and their enjoyment is important. As I said to that person, someone else's fun is just as important as your fun. Someone else's money is as valuable as your money. So their frustration is as valuable as your frustration. Their disappointment is as important as your apathy. You don't get to judge that because you play paper, that historic doesn't count. It's a make-believe format. I like to play paper, but hey, digital still exists. I don't really play a lot of historic, but historic exists and other people do play it and they do love it, and their enjoyment of that matters. So let's move out of this conceptual part of the conversation and actually talk about some real things that you can actually relate to if you haven't been following any of this. Let's start with what's good about this. So what I think are some of the good things about alchemy is that it opens up a lot of new space for wizards. Obviously, being able to create things intended for a digital platform opens up a lot of design space, and we've already touched on that briefly in the intro. We've seen some of it in historic. You can do things in a computer program that you can't do with a paper product. And there's been conversation about this for a long time, particularly since Eldraine came into standard, and there was a need for a lot of bans, and people remember when Oko was the only thing that mattered in standard. People wanted a ban, and it felt like forever before Wizards actually stepped in and banned it. There was a lot of conversation then, and it remains relevant, that it is difficult for Wizards to take that step, because even though this is Arena is a digital client, it is tied to a physical, tangible product. And people have bought that product, and they can't change that product. If I have a card over in my case over there, Wizards can't quickly scribble something out and change what it says. And if they ban that, then suddenly the thing that I paid money for is now blank cardboard. So there are constraints because it's tied to a physical product. And creating this new format eases some of those constraints. They can tweak things. They now can basically scribble out a line of text and change it. And I think that's fantastic. But there's a lot of complaints that our standard is solved too easily, that there's only a handful of top decks. And let me just point out, so I started playing Magic back in high school. So I think I started in 1999. I played my first game of Magic. And around 2001 to 2003, I was playing a lot of Magic. Now, I used to play Blue-Green Madness. At that point, there were 2 to 3 relevant decks in high-level competitive play. There was Blue-Green Madness, Psychotog, and Mono Black. Now, there were some other fringe decks, definitely, but it was basically a 3-deck meta in high-level competitive play. people would come to tournaments with brews and you could do well because of the unknown factor. We still see that in tournaments now, even though the format might be largely solved and we might know what the best decks are. When you go specifically to a tournament, you can make assumptions about what the metagame is going to be, and you can take a brew or a rogue deck that can attack that meta that might not be functional on ladder. But where I'm going with this is having a handful of top decks and that just being the case for a long time, that is nothing new. That's happened for a long time. And yeah, definitely we've just been through a period where, because our War of the Spark was so powerful, because Throne of Eldraine was so powerful, because a handful of cards in the following sets were so powerful, the new sets coming in didn't really matter. And some people feel that way, for example, about Crimson Vow. We already had Is It Turns, Mono Green and Mono White as the 3 best decks in the format. And this new set has given them new pieces and hasn't really changed the meta. But that's not a new development. It definitely happens faster because more people are playing digitally, but don't think that is an arena-only problem. That's basically, arena accelerates some of that. And some design choices recently have exacerbated that, but it's not a new problem. I think a lot of it is our perspective. There's always been some problematic cards. It becomes really obvious what they are. Not taking away, though, there have been some, what I would say, design mistakes recently. But yeah, formats do get stale. We're playing more Magic than ever. More people are playing than ever. Things are going to get solved faster and get boring quicker. When I got back into Magic, I'll go and play Friday Night Magic like once a week. Then eventually I downloaded Arena. I was playing a few games, but still the bulk of my playing was in person. Friday nights I'd play maybe against 5 different people with 5 different decks. Now I can churn through that many games in like an hour on a weekend. It's really easy to just churn through game after game after game. We're playing more Magic than we used to, so things get boring faster. Now, that is not an excuse to not address the problem. So Alchemy will allow Wizards to take some steps towards addressing a stale or repetitive format. If things are overperforming, they can come in, tweak them, turn them down a little bit, turn up the volume on a couple of other cards, and hopefully let some other decks and some other ideas flourish where otherwise they might not have been able to. And I think that's fantastic. I've been actually a little bit confused that having a digital client, Wizards hasn't taken advantage of that fact sooner. To me, this seems like incredibly low-hanging fruit. It seems like something that's inevitable. Like something like this, I feel, was always bound to happen. What is the point of having a digital platform to play your cards if you are not going to use the advantages that a digital platform allows you? Now, it's important to note, Alchemy is not replacing Standard. Standard will still be there. Standard will still be tied to the paper product. So those cards in Standard will not be changed. But we have this digital space. So why not create a space on that where you can change things that are problematic, change things that aren't quite hitting the mark, liven things up a little bit. And Wizards have given a specific time frame of when, after a new release, they're intending to make changes. So we don't need to be worried that like every other day something's going to be like brand new. Like there will be some structure to it. There will be some amount of like predictability and expectability to it. But I think it's great that we have this digital platform and now we have a space to take fuller advantage of that. Personally, I don't love digital-only cards, and I don't like some of those random effects that they explore in digital-only space, but that's just how I feel. Some people love them. I can't say that they're bad just because I have a preference to not have them. I like paper Magic. I like an experience that kind of mirrors that, but I haven't been able to play paper Magic for a while, and honestly I'm a little excited to jump into a format that can be tweaked like this, you know. I like to play fair, sort of mopey mid-range decks that haven't really been viable for a while. Maybe in a format like this, something like that can be viable because some of the more egregious outliers can be just toned down a little bit. So I think it's fantastic. It's also important to note a lot of people have come to Magic recently because of Arena. They only know Arena as a digital product. And a lot of those people would also just be scratching their heads like, why do I have to deal with this same thing day in, day out? Why can't you just change it? Like, Hearthstone does this, Runeterra does this, or so I'm told. I've never actually played those. Not everyone consumes Magic the same way. I've been playing in paper for a long time. I'm sure a lot of you have. Some people haven't. They only know it as digital. At the moment, I primarily play digital, and I'm looking forward to having something new and a little more refreshing to play. And this, again, this can allow a space for more people to enjoy Magic. Some people are put off by having a 3-deck meta and maybe not being able to put the resources into Arena to be able to build one of those top competitive decks, and they become disincentivized to play, and we lose them as players. And I don't want that. I want people to enjoy Magic. I want Wizards to have a bigger customer base so they can make more money and continue to thrive and make more products that I love. But I want them to make products that I love. That's important. But yeah, I think this is a good thing. Even if it's not for you, it probably is ideal for someone else. And there's nothing wrong with that. And honestly, good on Wizards for finally taking advantage of the digital space that they've created. Now that I've said that, I do need to point out there are some problems with execution. So let's talk about that. There are some genuine problems with this new format. Some of them are immediately obvious and some are potential problems. There's a lot of people that are upset by this announcement, and let's talk about why. Now, the big thing is cards that are changed in Alchemy will also be changed in Historic. So if they nerf a card because it's a problem in Standard, if they nerf it in Alchemy, your version of that card in Historic will also be nerfed. And you don't get a say in that. You can't opt out. I can opt out as a Standard player. I can play Standard, or I can play Alchemy. Historic players don't get Historic Alchemy. It's the same Historic queue, but the changes in Alchemy now impact their card. A lot of people are upset about this, and I totally understand why. That's not fair to Historic players. A card that is problematic in Standard is much less likely to be a problem in Historic. Certainly there's a lot of examples of cards that were problematic in both. And, this is allowing the return of some cards, such as Omnath, that are not currently legal in Historic. However, let's use, for example, Alrund's Epiphany. I know Alrund's Epiphany is used in some Historic decks, but it's not necessarily the problem in Historic that some people think it is in Standard. So it's going to be nerfed in Alchemy, and it's actually been announced that Alrund's Epiphany is one of the cards being nerfed, and you can see the new version of it. That new version is now going to be the version that you use in Historic. But it wasn't necessarily a problem in Historic, and people were happily playing it. People could have built a deck with a card, intending it to fill a certain role, and now that card is changed, and they have no agency in that decision. They have no opt-out, and they get nothing back. So if a card is... Often when a card is banned or has to be addressed in some way, on Arena they will give you some gems back or wild cards, or just a little something, basically along the lines of, we know we're taking value from you, so here's some value in return. That is not the case with Alchemy. Now they have said if you have the altered version of a card, you'll also have the original version of the card. So if I play Alchemy and I craft like the Alchemy Alrund's Epiphany, I also have regular Alrund's Epiphany. I now own both versions. But if you're in Historic, you only get to play one version. It doesn't matter that you have the other version. You're not getting value. There's nothing given back. You can't, you have the original Alrund's Epiphany, but you can't use it, so you might as well not have it. And this ties in to the bigger problem with Arena's economy being absolute garbage. And there's no excuse for that. There is no reason that they cannot implement some sort of system where I can take a card that I no longer need and trade it in for something. I'm not saying it has to be a 1-for-1. I take this card, I get a new card. But like a dusting system, which I think comes from Hearthstone. As I said, I've never played it. There's no reason they can't have some kind of transference, so that a card that I don't need or that I have multiples of, I can trade in and get some sort of value out of that instead of it just being a lost resource. It's been a frustrating issue with MTG for Arena for a long time. There's no reason it can't be addressed. There's no reason it shouldn't have been addressed already. and they've just now done something else to make it worse. So people are frustrated, and that is understandable. Even though I don't play Historic and that won't affect me so much, I share that frustration because it just ties into a big problem that doesn't need to exist. So think about it like this. Someone who plays only Historic, they have invested resources into playing Historic. Now, they might have used real-world money to buy gems, to craft cards, to build their deck. Or they might have just invested their time. They might have used in-game currency and had to spend time to build that up. Either way, that is a resource that they have given with the expectation of getting something in return. And this just goes to basic consumer confidence. Wizards has now said that thing that you exchanged your resource for, we are changing it, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you get nothing back. Now that's outrageous. That is not acceptable in any commercial environment. If I pay you money for a good or service, and I get that good or service, and then later you come back and you change that without giving me any say in it, without consulting me, without allowing me to opt out, and without giving me anything in return when I now can't use that good or service in the way that I intended. Like, that's the sort of thing, like where I live, we have, consumer protection organizations that we can report that sort of behavior to, and those companies get penalized. And this is basically that. If you have spent money to build a historic deck, and one of the cards in your deck is a card that gets altered in Alchemy, and it is no longer as powerful, and especially if you then have to swap that card out because there's no point playing it anymore, essentially Wizards has reached into your wallet, taken out a 20, put back $15, and just said, thanks mate, on your way. People are upset. This feels like a slap in the face to historic players, and honestly it is. I don't understand why they've gone ahead with this implementation. It seems to me like it would have been fairly sensible to just create historic Alchemy at the same time, so that players who are already enfranchised, have already spent time, spent money building up a collection to build historic decks, can continue to play the game that they enjoy. There's no reason that experience has to be taken away from them so that Wizards can balance standard. That's just mind-numbingly ridiculous that that's a situation they thought would be okay. So if someone is upset, they're probably upset for a good reason. There's also some concerning things that could happen. A lot of people have expressed concern that having access to a tool like this to just retweak things means that they will not be as disciplined in playtesting in the researching and development stage of cards. This will allow them to be lazier in designing cards and making sure that they're fine. Some people are even suggesting that this is specifically so that they can put less effort into playtesting and card design. Now, I don't think that's in evidence. To be entirely honest, I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't think it's reasonable to say that and assume that it's true. We can't read minds. I'm sure there's someone somewhere in Wizards or Hasbro who's like, yes, extra money, yes, I can cut the playtest team, yes, I can get more money from that guy playing historic, yes. I'm sure that's occurred to someone, but I don't know that that's necessarily the motivation. It definitely could happen. I remain optimistic that it won't, but I have to temper that by saying we have already seen a decline in the quality of our playtesting and design, and I think there's actually been some... I remember reading or hearing something about either the amount of time allowed for that, or the team that has been reduced, or the team that works on it has been downsized some time ago. I'm pretty sure there has been some reductions in that department, and also just psychologically, the fact that you have a safety net when you do something can't not impact your perception of that task in some way at some time. Not saying it's going to be everyone all the time, but the fact that there is we can go and tweak that later on Alchemy if we have to, particularly if Alchemy becomes really popular or the main way that people play an arena. It's very difficult to believe that won't end up with some risks being taken that otherwise wouldn't, or a little bit less effort being put in when schedules and deadlines are rushed. So I think that's a valid thing to be concerned about, but we don't know that that's going to happen. It's a thing that could happen. Hopefully it doesn't. but probably it will have at least some impact in some small way. But I don't think there's a lot of value in getting too lost in the weeds in that particular regard. I think we have enough to focus on with things that we know that are good and things that we know that are bad, that we don't need to spend too much time and energy speculating on what might happen. I did want to go through briefly and just show you some of the cards that are going to be impacted, just to give you guys a more concrete example of what we're talking about and what we're dealing with here. So I am hoping that I have the video editing skills and technological capacity to actually show you guys some of the cards here on the screen. So the one example that I already mentioned is Ulrin's Epiphany. The casting cost is remaining the same, but the foretell cost is increasing. So it's the foretell is now going to be 7, 5 colorless, 2 blue. So you pay 2 to foretell as normal, and then when you go to foretell, instead of casting 6, it still costs 7. And you only get the bird tokens if it's cast from the foretell zone. So this is, it might seem rather minor, but it is worth talking about how this nerfs the card. So as well as just making it more expensive and meaning you now need to invest 9 mana into it to get your extra turn and your bird tokens, it also weakens the chaining of Ulrin's Epiphany. For example, I've had games up on the channel, and I'm sure we've all had the experience of either playing with or against Ulrin's Epiphany and having, one cast, drawing another one off the top, maybe drawing another one off the top, chaining it extra turn into extra turn, getting all these tokens and being able to kill off our opponent or put them so far behind on life that it's very difficult for them to get back into the game. So this basically nerfs that scenario quite effectively. You might foretell one, cast it, get your birds, rip one off the top. You can still cast it, but you don't get more birds. You've still only got your 2 flyers. You would need to have already drawn multiple epiphanies and foretold multiple epiphanies. And there's a good chance that you might just be dead then, because that means you're not casting your other spells to slow down your opponent if they're aggro. Or you're just dragging the game on. It won't so much matter, I guess, in Epiphany Mirrors, but against aggro decks that are putting you under a lot of pressure, you might not have time to just foretell 3 or 4 Ulrin's Epiphanies. This is the sort of magnitude of changes that they want to make. It's small adjustments that they're hoping to make at first to just take the edge off, to stop some of the more egregious outlying cases. A Seeker's Chariot is another one that they're nerfing. It's still 4 mana, it's still a 4/4 vehicle, but you now only get 1 cat, but the Chariot now crews for 2. So instead of creating 2 2/2s and crewing for 4, you create 1 2/2 and crew for 2. Some people think it should still crew for 4, but either way, this is a significant nerf to a Seeker's Chariot. The reason Chariot is so powerful is it just creates so much value. If you answer the vehicle, there's still 4/4 worth of stats on the battlefield across 2 cards. And back in my day when I started playing Magic, you pay 4 mana for a 4/4 with downside. And you'd also walk 2 miles to school barefoot uphill both ways. It's also significant to point out, I think, that now Prismari Command can cleanly answer a Seeker's Chariot, and it's just a 1-for-1 exchange of cardboard. Chariot comes down, you get the actual Chariot, the 4/4, you get the 2/2 token. I can now, for 3 mana, cast my Prismari Command, 2 damage to the cat token, killing it off, and blow up the artifact. So I'm now up a mana advantage, and we've both traded 1 card for 1 card. So I think this is a significant nerf, and even though that scenario with Prismari Command, it's very specific, it's very relevant though. Prismari Command has been on the cusp of playability a few times, partly as an answer to Chariot. It even has been played even though it isn't a great answer to Chariot. It now is a clean answer to Chariot. So Prismari Command is something you need to think about more now. The other big one is Omnath. Omnath is coming back, but he now costs 5 mana, 1 colourless, a red, a green, a white, and a blue. He's still a 4/4. He still has the same landfall triggers, but now instead of drawing a card when he enters the battlefield, you scry 1. So he's slowed down theoretically by a turn, which is huge. and you don't automatically draw a card to replace him. So if you play your Omnath and I'm able to answer him straight away, I'm not down a card. Now we all remember how miserable playing against Omnath was, because he could come down and if he survived, the player on the next turn could basically play solitaire for the next 20 minutes, draw their whole deck and play the whole thing, and I wouldn't get to do anything. And even if I answered Omnath as soon as he hit the board, they have drawn, my opponent would have drawn a card and I'm still down in that exchange. And if you remember, right after Zendikar came out, Croaky started playing a Grixis control list, and a few other people did, and it just became really important to have a counter spell to answer Omnath, because the only way to answer Omnath without falling behind. Because if you hit the board, even if you answered him, you're down a card. If he survives a turn, you've probably lost the game. And counter spells haven't really been great recently. So this changing from a draw a card to a scry 1, you still get something, but that is a significant nerf. Particularly now that he's also costing 5 mana. And then there's also some cards that they've upped the power of a little bit. I'm not going to go through all of those because this video is going to require a lot of editing. I've already been at this for a long time. Even if I hadn't had to redo everything, this is still like a good length of time. My voice is getting sore, so I want to wrap up, but I will try to remember to link down there in the description to an article where you can actually look at the cards that they've spoiled that have already been adjusted. And there will be some new cards introduced that did not otherwise exist. Some of those are on the same article, so again, hopefully link will be down there. But that's all for today, talking about Alchemy. My voice is getting pretty sore, my back is getting sore. I need to start cooking dinner, and then I'm going to need to edit this video to have it done in time. This is something new for us on the channel. This is a little bit of an experiment to see how well this is received. So if you enjoyed this sort of format where I just talk to you guys about something to do with the game, let me know down there in the comments, or leave a like. It is likely that there will be some amount of correlation to how positively this is received and how likely I am to do it again. Similarly, if you didn't like it, let me know. If you agree or disagree or have strong feelings about anything we talked about, please do let me know. And don't stress, I will be back very soon with gameplay content. I already have gameplay recorded, I just need to turn it into a video and put it up for you guys. That'll be up in a few days at the normal time. But otherwise, thanks so much for tuning in. If you're still watching now, thanks for sitting and having a chat with your old mate Cams. I really do appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you got something out of it. You stay brilliant, and I'm going to catch you real soon.